I want to start out by apologizing for deleting my last video. It was all really heavy, and I felt like it took away from the whole rest of the video. That was only the first 2 minutes. I've posted it on my other channel without the first 2 minutes, and you're welcome to check it out. If I apologize, it's for deleting your beautiful comments, and I read them all, and my heart was really lightened by all your beautiful comments, and I feel like we all just put our emotions into that video. I know I certainly did, and deleting it was perhaps symbolic of letting them go now, burning them, so the phoenix may rise. Anyways, I'm not sure what we're talking about today, but thank you for being here, and welcome. Somebody recently told me in a comment that they don't mind when I share my personal stories. They were saying that our life experience is oftentimes the most relatable and understandable thing. We can talk about all these concepts, but what is true and most real to us is often simply our experience as a human. And the further out we travel from this center, the more dreamlike and unreal things seem to be. Some things I wanted to touch on was leveling ground. A lot of people want to say no problem to build a 1,000,000 square foot building, or even 200 of them in 18 months. As we discussed in my last video about Philadelphia and the World's Fair, and what is more remarkable than even building, I believe, are all the groundworks, the passageways underground, the basement levels, the waterways, plumbing for the fountains, and even just excavating the ground that you're about to build a 1,000,000 square foot building on. Today we would use a laser, and really I don't know how we could attain such perfection without a laser in an early time period. If you're 1 inch off by the time you reach the end of your 1,000,000 square foot building, your building could end up very crooked. And here we are on the Google Earth, or whatever it is, and we can see here the Please Touch Museum, one of the World's Fair buildings still remaining. Not as large as many of them were, but still absolutely remarkable. And in a comment, somebody told me much of the site is now a military golf course, off limits, and here I am. And sure enough, golf courses, as we've discussed in past videos, golf courses are, or seem to be, a favored cover-up after a lot of these buildings are leveled. Golf courses and parks and cemeteries. And so here I was just noodling around, looking at these golf courses, and we can see the imprint of the buildings still. They left the concrete leading up to these buildings in many cases, and just amazing when you consider that this is the footprint of this fair. Here again we can see a leveled building once sat here, a massive one, and a tiny little building still remaining, the Psychoanalytic Center of Philadelphia, ridiculous, and tons of old brick buildings just scattered all throughout here. And long ago in a past video, I had hypothesized that the site of these World's Fairs were actually just grand neighborhoods, the grandest, especially in St. Louis. When looking at their hundreds of buildings, a lot of them just seem like people's houses, nothing to do with a fair. And here I zoomed into this Fairmount Park Organic Recycling Center. As I've often said, turning these areas into dumps, certainly quarries. If there's anything usable, we see quarrying of the ruins. And here we have a recycling center. So they've just, I think, recycling of the World's Fair is what we're seeing here. Look at this toxic looking pond. But let's zoom into this recycling center. And what do we see? A pretty large brick building. Really looking like an old worlder. Let's see if they let us down here. No. But giving us some kind of a scale and feeling a little castle-like. But completely having been stripped. And more importantly, this was probably just the back part of the building. I think the footprint for the building is right here in this now parking lot. And the grand terrace is right here. This is still the original concrete. And you can see these massive sections that have been poured long ago. This is the old good quality concrete. And sure enough, they are grinding it down and reutilizing it. And eventually it probably will be gone. Right off the Highway 76 here. And again, the footprint is all that remains. They call them parks, fields, golf courses. And it would be really interesting actually to peruse these grounds. I'm sure there's still a lot of interesting things to be seen. And not many million square footers in sight. Here would have sat a 1,000,000 square footer. And this building right here is a 1,000,000 square footer. I'm sure of it. Let's have a little look at it. So this is some kind of a train depot, the maintenance facility. And can we drop the man down here? Yes, but it's down below. But really looking like a 1,000,000 square foot brick building. And perhaps this is left over. I'm not sure why they don't want us down here. Let's try again. And next I want to talk about a huge and major theory. Or maybe just clarify on an old one. It's about Tartaria. And I think I've said it 1,000,000 times, how I use that term generically, and many in our community do. It's just a term that we use. It's a name that we gave to something that had no name. And I think it's important to do that. But right now I want to talk about what it really means. To me, it means that all of this, and not just these 1,000,000 square foot buildings, including the one we're looking at right now, but even these homes in these neighborhoods, are all from a past civilization. And no, they weren't Tartarians. And no, they weren't angels. This isn't the Millennial Kingdom's work. Much of it is not that spectacular. But yet it all just shows up. Beginning in the 1850s, everything just sprouts into existence. It doesn't matter, even in San Francisco and Salt Lake City, some of the last cities in the West to be developed, spring into existence with the same features that we see in any city in the entire world. And to this day, all we have done is just patched up or demolished this old world. Here we're looking at a patch job. And again, not angels or even Tartarians. A people similar to ourselves. And I don't believe that they use some magical technology to float blocks into place. I think they did things like we do. Everything. We have only recreated their world and cheapened it. And yes, we do see architecture with massive doors and features. And I do believe those are built by a larger people. And that's not our story. Our story is this story. And I feel fortunate to have landed on these buildings. Just so telling. Again, what we've done is just cleaned up these remains. These buildings were in shambles, and here is the work of the 1850s and early 1900s. These new front entryways and patching everything up, and there are no artisans like this. Here we can see rounded arches with square windows in them. And we see all the patching up of these buildings, and this is what we would be capable of doing upon inheriting these buildings. Wood additions, and ultimately this is not our world. But I believe they were similar people, and there was a cataclysm, and most people died, but yet there were survivors, and everything would continue. and factions and gangs would arise, and the people in power today are the children of those thugs and factions that would eventually write our textbooks and history. And to this day, so much is still in the same condition in which it was inherited in, every part of the realm. And people want to talk about trafficking and the problem with that whole subject, and I would propose it's much worse than that, both today and in the past. I imagine there are entire human farms out there, and again, were in the past as well. Somebody recently told me not to make a recording when I'm angry, and yet some of my best have been when I'm angry. Although I try to not show it. I told myself not to make videos when I'm depressed, but we really can't plan these things. And I think the best time to record is when you're inspired to record, or when you can. Long before I ever made videos, I would just comb the Google, and I'd run across these kinds of things. Artificially planted forests, as if some great farming machine, massive it would have to be, had come out and planted trees in rows. And I've seen it in my mountains up in the National Forest. I've seen it up in Siberia. And here I'm in South Carolina. And there's supposed to be a star fort around here, and I'm just getting sidetracked by the artificial planting of forests, like a cover-up. And this star fort around here is called the 96 National Historic Site, right in the heart of this artificially forested area. And I'm not sure what's on the top. I don't think there's much left on the top. It looks like everything has been raked clean by some machinery, and this is something I'd researched long ago. And here it is, I think. Let's see. We can zoom in and we can see the faintest husk of the star fort, despite their great efforts to eliminate it. As we can see, they've graded and raked the land all around it, and some ruins, and really portraying this as some old 1800s fort. A lot of drawings of it, making it look stupid and primitive. My dog says I'm being too forceful. So here it is. And this is cool enough, I would say. But now, just as we're always talking about, everything will be found underground. This, again, even with their great efforts to destroy this, much is to be found underground. And many sites I've wished I had a LIDAR, something to penetrate and give a visual of what lies under. And in this case, somebody has. Let me just show you this old article that I've been sitting on forever. And here we go. This is what LIDAR has revealed under this site. Here, to be more precise, one tunnel going under, and then another one by this star fort, which we're told they buried with sand. And the tunnel is collapsed and is in complete disrepair. Oh my god, that was too funny. I boiled beets, as usual, and afterwards I put the pot down, and Chief drank, I don't know, maybe about 5 cups of beet water. And right now he just had to pee, and he let me know. And he really did. But anyway, earlier we were looking at the footprint of the old World's Fair, and how now it's been turned into a golf course. And here we see something very similar, a site that has been scrubbed. And thankfully, some ambitious researchers, academic researchers who got funding, did this LIDAR imaging and discovered that there's much more under this, what they would portray as a primitive star fort. And I'll show you some pictures of that star fort, how primitive they portray it to be. And so all this would have been built, this tunneling, in the 1800s, according to the narrative. And they're telling us it was a mine, and here we can see a cross section. And I don't know why I'm going backwards. But anyway, at some point I want to show you what really got me to dive into this some time back, and that is all the bricks at the entrance of these tunnels, bricked archways. And if our community was serious, which it is, and I think eventually we will begin doing our own LIDAR imaging. At least I hope to. And this tunnel is way too crazy and complex for primitive means. And there's a lot of naysayers that attack this community, and I don't think there's really much to attack when simply asking questions. Now, many have put ideas out as if they are absolute fact, and I hope to not be one of those channels. I would prefer to look at what they tell us is absolute fact, and if at all possible, show that it is not a fact. Our whole history is not a fact, but rather a story. Interwoven, of course, with some truth, it would have to be. And here I think we may be looking at what LIDAR reveals. So now no trees, and we actually see straight lines, right angles, signs of advanced and long-forgotten engineering. And even with their great efforts to bury this starfort, as we were looking at earlier, we still see what's underground. And these are tunnels, massive, massive tunnels. And this is a historic site from the 1800s. Again, we'll look at the primitive pictures that they tell us the area would have looked like back when. But I'm not buying it. This is as good as it gets, in my opinion. But unfortunately, these people who brought us this are sticking to the narrative. I'm sure some of them are scratching their heads. And here again, we see how everything connects, and there's much more below. This is an indication that now things are going deeper into this section. And they tell us this project is a partnership between the University of South Florida and the National Park Service and the Public Broadcasting Service. Why not squeeze a few bucks out of them too? But this is a great study. Absolutely mind-blowing. Just in this little picture, we have more of a feel for what was really going on in the past, before the cataclysm of water, mud, and plasma. Here, underneath this picture, we have this starfort, and we can see all the lines leading out from that point. And I believe these were much more advanced feats of engineering than the mainstream will portray here. But again, I am very grateful for their work. Quite a job and very expensive equipment. And here getting a good look again at the LIDAR image. And I showed you how forested and how artificially forested it was. This would be impossible to see without the LIDAR imaging. And look at all of this. I mean, they've just excavated this area here in blue. And yet it's everywhere. Here, by this cemetery, down here, zigzagging angles, looking like a star, and under here as well. And what of this Nazca Peruvian looking line just shooting across? Clearly not natural. And no exploration seems to have been done except for this little dot right here. So I do hope this research continues, and I look forward to following their research. Eventually, I'm sure they'll find this tunnel right here. And this is a big deal. This, I believe, is a whole city. And of course, I was looking for anything advanced. And when I saw the bricks, in my opinion, that was all I needed, were these brick archways. Here we go. Images taken in the eastern brick portion of the mine. So why would you brick a mine in the early 1800s in a super deep tunnel? I'm not sure exactly the depth, but it varied, as you saw from some of those cross sections earlier. Look at this. And I think only in our community would all this make sense. And here again we can see the cross sections, and you see how some of them just go straight down 3 different levels. These may be the inside passageways of buildings, for all we know. Collapsed stairwells or elevator shafts even. And here again a beautiful look at this LIDAR image. Absolute gold. And coupled with the complete cover-up on the surface, how can all this be explained with their narrative? And here again we see excavations beginning in another part of a tunnel, brick fused with mud, and again, brick archways. This is a big deal. And even with all this money and research, proper sense is not being made of all of this, or even exposure. So I'm very excited to have finally gotten to this, and I think we'll look at something else. And some people have commented on how wrong it is that I use disposable plates and cutlery, but for me it's my way of celebrating the disposable civilization in which we live. Owning a coffee shop, I've done more dishes than a man should ever do. And here my Dr. Gundry diet is going well. We can see some sweet potato chips, spinach, carrots, olive oil and balsamic vinaigrette, and I fried up some shrimp and broccoli with iodized sea salt and pepper, of course, and some other spices. And here Martin has showed some pictures. Martin at Flat Earth British that tie in beautifully with what we're looking at today. And is this what lies under our feet? And how deep is anyone willing to excavate? We see this realm-wide. Most recently in my neck of the woods, the Salt Lake City Temple was being excavated, and they've gone down at least 3 stories with no sign of a foundation yet. And who's offering an explanation to this? Salt Lake City is supposed to have been one of the more recent cities to be fabricated in our realm. And yet we have a temple being built supposedly by a horse and wagon people, with a temple that goes down 3 stories, and nobody seems to notice or care. And I am due for a field trip soon. And these are great, whoever made this. And again, what would the realm look like after it was covered in mud and water and death? It would look like things like this. This is a beautiful depiction, and we see things like this out in the desert and think, what is this anomaly? And what you're not seeing is the under portion, which is allowing this to be formed. Similar to those pins in the 80s that you could stick your face on and it would create an impression. And exactly what we were just seeing with the LIDAR. So now with the LIDAR imaging, we are getting only this. We're getting the impression, but we're still not seeing what's deep underground. LIDAR technology is not that great yet, and I believe the furthest that we've drilled is 18 miles maybe 80. Don't quote me on that. And here's one of Egypt. And again, when we found Egypt, this is a great depiction. Covered in sand. Everything was excavated. And then at a certain point, they stopped excavating. And yes, similar to the Salt Lake Temple, if we have not hit the ground yet, then it's fair to conclude that the building continues. And same with the pyramid here. Here, just an ordinary tower, it might be. And here the mud flood, as depicted up here. Awesome job, whoever you are, whoever made these. And again, thank you, Martin, for sharing them. But here's what our realm looks like when we look at these old photos, thousands of them by now. Just a mess. And again, when we begin to excavate, we find more building. And we find entire cities, such as Pompeii, and the other one next to it. Here I wanted to look at this film in Iran, but we'll save that for another day. This was pure comedy, but we'll also skip that. And here was thousands of photos that Stuffed Beagle shared of the St. Louis World's Fair in the early 1900s. And they tell us they had 200 or so buildings, just like all the other fairs, but I think there were thousands. And here's a great look at 4 guys building one of them, I guess. Or is this a horse stall? I'm not sure. And it just was remarkable, the amount of building that we're told was taking place. I mean, you just saw that picture I showed, and those guys were really struggling and tired, it looked like. And what of this? Again, so tired. And isn't the road more important? Oftentimes we see photos of opening day or the fair in action, and the roads still look like this. Sometimes trees growing in the middle of the road, and I don't know. But I know what it seems like, and it doesn't seem like these people are responsible for all of this. And I don't think that these citizens that these people are a part of give two shits about going to a fair that looks like this. I mean that nobody cares about all of this. Not today, and especially not then. People have different needs back then. They're not great appreciators of such fine arts. Very simple people. But I think we'll save this whole collection for another video. I wish you all a blessed week ahead. Thanks for being here. God bless, and I love you all.